Today is Monday, November 4th, and today's agricultural fact of the day has been a little bit controversial and has been in the news recently, and a lot of people just are not aware of their local laws. Today's ag fact: the state of New York requires individuals to attain a license if they wish to keep wild animal species. Peanut the squirrel and Fred the raccoon were being kept illegally in Pine City, New York. The squirrel was rescued when its mother was killed 7 years ago and has been hand raised. The raccoon was given to them a few months ago due to injuries and had been intended to release it into the woods once it was 100% better. Both have been euthanized by the DEC, and their brain tissue has been submitted for rabies testing. Many people don't quite understand why there are laws in place with wild species, especially when it comes to rabies. That's not something that they screw around with. And if you plaster it all over social media because you're doing stuff illegally, eventually you're probably going to get caught. This thing was Instagram famous, and I'm sure that this couple made significant amounts of money off of the publicity that they had from this cute, adorable squirrel wearing a hat or whatever else they had it dressed up in. And many people in the social media world are not educated on that either, and they're like, oh my god, a squirrel, it's so cute, it's such a cute little pet. Like, it's not a pet, it's a wild animal, and technically those people are breaking the laws. But I don't know what they were thinking when they were posting all these things on social media, because eventually that's going to come out. Now, I don't follow that account, so I don't know how public they made it that they lived in New York State, but New York State has a lot of laws. We have a lot of control in this state, and I don't really love it, but there are these laws in place for a reason. Rabies in itself is nothing to screw around with, and this fact, when I did it in class, also provided me with the opportunity to inform the students how exactly they go about testing an animal for rabies. And of course, I draw on stories from the vet clinic that I worked at, and I have some horrific stories that are literally heart-wrenching that I tell these kids. And if they've been in other ag classes with me, they will recall these stories a few years down the road when they're in a different ag class and it comes up. But for those of you that do not know, typically when tissue needs to be submitted for rabies testing, obviously the animal is euthanized and it is essentially beheaded, and the entire head will be submitted for testing. Now, there was an exception to this. I remember back at my old school, we had a ram that came down with polio encephalomyelitis or something. He ate too much grain, or I can't remember, but he had a vitamin B deficiency is what it actually came down to. But since he was on school property, they also recommended that we submit brain tissue for rabies testing. Now, in that instance, I wanted to keep the skull. Like, that was something I have it. We had a European mount done on it. I still have it because I paid for that to be done to it. But I think because I had planned on he had really cool horns, and I think that's probably why they just submitted a small sample. But typically, if you have a dog or a cat, and I could go on with these stories forever about animals that had bit somebody, wasn't up to date on their rabies vaccine, and just because the owner wanted to euthanize it right then, that had to be decapitated, and that had to be submitted for testing. So there are rules and laws around that when it comes to a situation such as this. And does New York State have bigger problems that they should be dealing with? Yes, absolutely. Some of the stuff that they allocate resources to or make laws about, in the grand scheme of things, how about we talk about the punishments for criminals that are just let out on the street? But let's not go there. Moral of the story: if you're gonna do something that isn't necessarily following the laws, you may want to do some research on that, or at least see if whatever animal you're keeping requires a license or not. because I bet they didn't do their homework. And had they done their homework, they probably would have gotten that license. I don't know how difficult it is to achieve, how to get it. I'm sure that money has to change hands. And of course, anytime you get a certification or a license, you have to pay dearly to the state. But if they knew what was coming down the road, I would be hard pressed to believe that they wouldn't have done that. So before you get an animal, make sure you do your homework. So if you're taking in wild stray animals, rescuing them, first of all, if you don't have a license, you have no want to obtain a license is to find a certified wildlife rehabilitator, because that will save you a lot of headache and a lot of fines and save innocent lives. And then number two, if you really want to keep that animal, go through the proper certification. And don't plaster it all over social media. Also, just a reminder, I do still have my Amazon wish list on my bio. It's in my link tree. So if you would like to support my classroom, feel free. And the Golden Owl recommendations are due November 15th. So if you had planned on filling that out for me, I did post a video step-by-step with it. Go back and watch that video if you still would like to do it. You do need some of the information that I put in that video, so let me know if you have questions.